Does combat take too long in your D&D sessions? Are you spending hours on just a handful of rounds? You're not alone. This is a common problem that many DMs face, and it can be hard to fix. If you're struggling with this, there's a simple rule that can help: the 110 rule for combat. The 110 rule is a commonly used role-playing mechanic that limits the time players can make choices about their actions to 10 times the length of action their character can take. In combat, this means that when a player's turn comes up, they're given 1 minute to make up their mind about what they want to do. Since a round of combat represents 6 seconds, the player only gets 60 seconds to make a decision. How this plays out is when a player's turn starts, so does the clock. They can still ask questions and get clarifications from you, but they are out of question time when the timer runs out. This actually does a really good job of simulating the snap decision-making process of battle, much more than infinite time to ponder their moves does. It's important to note here that while you are limiting their time, if they lack proper information to make a decision, it's your job to rectify that. So be lenient when you have to spend more than a minute clarifying a situation for your players. Your descriptions are your time, not theirs. At first, the 110 rule can seem harsh, but that's only because it takes time to get used to it. The rule itself has been in place in TTRPGs of all sorts for a long time, and it's still often passed around online because it is effective. When your players have infinite time to think about what they want to do, they won't feel the need to make snap decisions. In that situation, they might want to ensure that they're making the most optimal decisions they can. But in doing so, they slow down the game for everyone else. The 110 rule, while strict, cuts down on this and pushes players to pay attention, make quick decisions, and apply active listening to combat. The 110 rule is something you add to solve a problem, but your players are not likely to be excited about it when you introduce it. They might agree that combat is dragging on, but at the same time, they could feel that it's too restrictive. The biggest gripe is often that it's such a huge change from what they're used to. We've seen players take 10 minutes for a single turn before. When you cut that down to 1 minute, it feels like a completely new game. To ease players into this, don't be too strict on the first use. Simply offer warnings when they start to go over. Additionally, to make the whole thing a little smoother, ensure you visualize the time for them. You can do this with a few 1-minute hourglasses, one for each player. Or if you're a huge nerd, many chess clocks have a 1-minute reset button built right in. Either way, it's much easier to implement when your players can see what a minute looks like and can get a feel for it without any harsh punishments on its first use. When you change rules and game mechanics, it's often best to talk to your players about it well beforehand and offer your reasonings as to why you're putting the new rules in place. This open communication sets the stage for your players to feel like they're helping you solve a problem, rather than you telling them they are the problem. One additional thing you can do that will make this rule feel easier for your players is offer them an incentive to stick to it. One that we like to use is to offer them advantage on any looting rolls they do if they stay under their time limits on their turns. If they do go over, no advantage for them. This isn't a huge reward, but it does help incentivize the adaptation of the game rules without relying on only punishment. In the case that your players really cannot stick to the rule, you can introduce punishments. The most effective one is simply to have your players bungle their turn if they cannot decide and move them down one slot in the turn order. This is not as harsh as skipping their turn for the round, but it is still very punishing and should only be used if your player really drags things out without good reason. You may find that the hardest part about adapting to the 110 rule is following it yourself. You don't have time to think about the enemy's decisions on the player's turns because you have to maintain the game and calculate all the little behind-the-scenes details that happen to keep the game running. Because of this, it's often best for you to plan ahead and write up a decision tree for your monsters before combat starts. This simple act will tell you what the enemies will do in any given situation. When do they attack? When do they run? Who do they target? These are simple questions that you can keep on a note card and follow to speed up your combat and make sure you're following the same rules as you set for your players. If you fail to keep the 110 rule, your players are going to be less likely to keep to it themselves. The 110 rule really works to help stop common combat hangups. Simply restricting the time your players can take to decide on their actions can speed up your game a lot. It can make combat feel punchier, enhance the engagement of your players, and offer a challenge to the players in a meta sense to stay on the clock. Remember, talk to your players about the rules before you introduce them, and be sure that everyone is on board. You need to adapt your implementation of new rules to your players, and this may mean that your time limits are longer or that your punishments and rewards are stronger. Lastly, remember that the rule isn't set in stone, and you're still in charge of maintaining the game. So give the 110 rule a try and see if you can improve your next combat scenario. Let us know in the comments if you have other ways of speeding up combat in your games. If you'd like to help the channel out, sharing our videos is the best way to do that. You can find more D&D advice and resources at masterthedungeon.com. Happy DMing!